Time management is the third component of the remote work mastery scale, and it's one of the biggest shifts from a physical office environment, especially when you're working closely in close proximity to your colleagues, and especially with a supervisor or a manager. Managing your time independently is a big challenge for a lot of people. It's something more and more people have been learning, especially in the last couple of years, because there's more software, more communication tools and tech that some people are much more familiar with using instead of everything being in a physical space by default. But time management in the workplace is a significant challenge in almost every workplace. No matter what your roles or responsibilities, no matter what you have to get done, getting that work done in the right amount of time, figuring out the optimal amount of time to get different projects done, to get different pieces of work done is challenging. And it may or may not be more difficult in a remote working environment, but it is fundamentally different. When you're in a remote working environment or working from home, there's all sorts of different demands on your time. So balancing that is constant work in a remote working environment. Now we can look at three different components of time management. And the first one is prioritization. So especially when you're working remotely, you need to figure out different time frames for different projects, different tasks, different responsibilities. Whatever you have to get done, you have to understand when the deadlines are, when the due dates are, when they're required, and by whom. And you'll need to develop communication skills in tandem to figure out how to prioritize your time and what the different demands are on you. And the way these skills have to be developed will vary depending on how much you work with other people. So if a lot of people are dependent on your work, or there's a lot of interdependencies in the team, then communication is going to be even more critical. And you're going to need to be able to find out timeframes and deadlines and due dates and all of that stuff, and understand the full process of everyone's different inputs and everyone's different contributions to get things done as part of a high-functioning, successful team. Whereas if you work a lot more independently, then time management is actually really different. And sometimes it's more challenging and sometimes it's easier. So there's fewer dependencies. So there'll be less time spent waiting for other people, waiting for meetings, trying to plan things, trying to organize different people's schedules. But a lot of people struggle with independent time management as well. So if your work is mostly independent and you don't have a lot of other people relying on you day to day, there's not a lot of short-term deadlines, then sometimes it's challenging to motivate yourself for big long-term projects. But when you're fully responsible for an entire big project with a long-term deadline, then you have to break it down into reasonable short-term units of work that are reasonable based on your own timeframes, what you can get done, and make sure it all fits together. So that can be really challenging when planning a big project, right? If you've got a huge project, it's due in 6 months, not a lot of clear structure, but you know what the end product looks like, breaking that down into manageable chunks can be really challenging. And that's something a lot of people struggle with, is managing their own time without external input. If you don't have other people telling you what to do every day or every week, for a lot of people that's quite liberating, but it's also really challenging. So managing your time and prioritizing different tasks and setting up a schedule independently is something that takes a lot of work and a lot of practice, a lot of self-motivation, discipline, figuring out what works and what doesn't over time. The next thing is scheduling, and I alluded to that in independent work, so how you schedule your own time, how you schedule your own tasks, whether you're blocking out specific days for specific types of work, how much you're multitasking, how much you block out for emails or other communication. A lot of people find it's really useful to compartmentalize time spent on digital communication, so you might have certain days that you do most of your meetings, you might have certain blocks of time you carve out for responding to emails. One of the things I like to do personally is set emails to send at a later time or date. So for things that aren't urgent, if I'm getting through a whole bunch of emails or I've got a lot coming in at one time, I don't necessarily want to spend the entire day doing emails because I'm responding to things back and forth in real time for things that aren't urgent. So sometimes what I do for non-urgent emails is schedule them to send later in the day or stagger the timings. So I avoid getting caught in the trap of spending an entire day just chatting back and forth with people about different projects when I need to get something else done. And there's some times where it's much better to be available on email or by messaging applications or whatever other tools you're using. But prioritizing those different types of work and the different important parts of your work are going to make you more productive, and they're essential for time management. Now, when you're scheduling things with other people, this is another challenge in remote work, especially when you're working with different people, different locations, different offices, different time zones, people with different flexible schedules who are in the office or available at different times. So this is something that takes a while to get the cadence right of setting up regular meetings. And if you've got a team that works quite closely together, it's usually good to have regular scheduled meetings. So maybe once or twice a week. And you should be setting agendas for these meetings too, so you've got a clear idea of how how you're spending your time, what you're talking about, what you want to accomplish in those meetings. It's good to have certain sections of unstructured time with the team too, but if you're regularly scheduling meetings that are, quick check-ins or progress reports, then it's good to make sure you have a clear agenda and a clear focus, stuff you want to accomplish or get from those meetings. Sometimes it's nice to have a bit of a chat before or at the end, but make sure you're actually getting stuff done on those meetings too. And you also want to think about the size of meetings you're scheduling. So the optimal kind of group size for getting stuff done is about 4 to 7 people. Sometimes that's plus or minus a few, depending on the team, depending on the project, who needs to be involved. But if you really want to have focused, productive meetings, small groups are best. There's all sorts of other types of communication. If they're company-wide events, big updates, major events, that you might want to have larger groups. But then those are more broadcasting events where a few people are talking and there's a clear set agenda. You definitely don't want to have big groups of hundreds of people where anyone can chime in on a Zoom call. Otherwise, it's going to be chaos. Now, the last component of time management is work-life balance, and you need to make sure your work-life balance fits into your schedule. It can be really challenging to do at times, especially if you've got seasonal work that's really busy, if you've got looming deadlines, you'll always have stuff that is going to take away from that work-life balance, and you need to make sure you're prioritizing it as well. So the advantage of a flexible schedule is that if you're clear, you're well-structured, you've got a plan for how you want to manage your work-life balance, and you've got your own kind of individual personal priorities and goals, then you know how to manage that and work that in. The problem with remote and flexible working sometimes is it's so easy for work to creep in at every opportunity. It's easy to work a bit late. It's easy to start a bit early. It's easier to be working in your office when your office is in your home. It's easier to do unscheduled, sometimes unnecessary work when you can just open your laptop and phone and it's there, especially when you're working with people all around the world who are working at all different times. So you might be in a virtual working environment where at some time of day, there's always a few people working. So you want to make sure you carve out time. It doesn't necessarily need to be 9 to 5. You can figure out whatever time works for you as long as it aligns with your colleagues, your team, whoever else you're working with. So make sure you're carving out time for work-life balance. Whether you're getting healthy meals, you might want to schedule lunch breaks. If you're working in evenings or mornings, you might want to schedule dinner or breakfast breaks that fit for you so you have time to make nutritious meals, so you have time to actually enjoy the food, so you have time to take a break to do different things. So you're not just scarfing something down at your desk or eating a sandwich between meetings. It's best to carve out some time for any sort of important biological function. Make sure you had time to actually do it. So whether that's eating, whether that's getting exercise, whether that's going out and getting some fresh air, make sure you carve some time out for it, both daily, weekly, monthly, and yearly. So you're thinking of daily taking reasonable breaks, getting a bit of exercise, making sure you're taking care of your physiological and mental health. The two are connected and you need to prioritize both, because the problem is everyone will get burnt out if they don't make any time to take care of their physiological, physical, psychological needs. If you don't do that, it will lead to burnout. Different people can manage different levels of stress, challenge, difficulty, but everyone can burn out, and if you're not taking care of yourself, you will. And being productive and healthy in the long term are completely interconnected. So you need to be taking care of your health to take care of your productivity. So there may be times when you need to work late or take calls at strange hours. So you need to make sure you're carving out some time for your personal life, your personal goals, and for a sense of work-life balance, whatever that means to you. So you need to define it for yourself, but you also need to make sure you're taking care of yourself so you take care of your work performance, because your work performance is highly dependent on your own well-being.